For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
What do you see as the major political issue arising in our country this year?
I think there are a lot of things, but what comes to mind when we look back at last year is the question of instability. Business is very worried about the stability of state institutions. The public is worried about the stability of state institutions, affects them as well. 20 years ago, we never have started with what worries business, but I realize now that in a situation of uncertainties, the stability of the business sector can be a very big factor, a powerful factor, because they're organized in a way that other sectors are not so well organized. So that's why I mentioned business early. If you look at last year, there was hardly a key institution that was not in the center of controversy. If you take the National Prosecuting Authority, for example, they appointed this chap Abrams together with the Hawks. He was continually hovering over the finance ministry. And one got the impression that we knew from the various evidence that's been uncovered that the so-called rogue units in SARS, that there was nothing irregular about it, and there were threats and there were allegations, and eventually the NPA, in a very pompous way, announced charges against the Minister of Finance and 3 former SARS officials. And if one looks at that from the very beginning, in order to prove a charge of fraud, you have to prove that there is fraudulent intent. And it was very clear that the NPA had not prepared a case properly. Whether there was a case or wasn't a case, which the court could decide, the fact of the matter is they had not checked, they relied on the Hawks to check on what procedures had been followed previously in regard to early retirements, and they brought the case on the basis of it being irregular to have paid out Ivan Pillay for an early retirement. In fact, there was a legal opinion which the Hawks concealed from the NPA, saying that there was nothing irregular about this. There was other things connected with this, like at one stage them holding a legal officer of SARS in a room at SARS. When this seemed to be falling apart, Abrams then withdrew the charge, but there's a lot of correspondence that came out which shows that there are not just tensions between the Ministry of Finance, SARS, sections of SARS and ex-sections of SARS, but also between the Hawks and the NPA, because the Hawks wanted Abrams to continue with this case, which was not a case. And Abrams says, but you people just messed me up in this case. So there's tensions there as well. You have a situation in NPA. NPA is the head of the prosecution system in the country. It's very, very important for us to trust the officials who hold it. Now, since 1994, there is not a single person who has served it's been he in each case, his whole term as head of the NPA. The first one appointed by Zuma, Menzi Simelane, was removed as a result of a court order. Nkosana was removed with a deal between him and Zuma, with Nkosana not actually wanting to go. Now, people went to court, Helen Suzman Foundation and Freedom Under Law, to remove Abrams, but the court said, look, we can't, it's premature. The president has still got to apply his mind to his matter. So they didn't decide whether he's fit proper. They said, wait, this is not the time. In the meantime, the president called on Abrams to give reasons why he shouldn't be suspended. And the people surrounding Abrams, two of these, including Jiba, Nomcobo Jiba, the deputy head, have been struck with the role of advocates for disgraceful conduct. And they are appealing. The appeal is likely to fail. And if it fails, you can't hold a position in the NPA unless you're a qualified advocate. So even if Abrams stays there, Abrams will not be surrounded by a strong supporter of Zuma like Jiba, who fought all the way up to the highest courts to keep the so-called spy tapes out. When they got to those courts, they admitted they had no reason not to hand over the tapes. So there's a whole lot of irregularities. They were prepared to perform on behalf of Zuma, and recognizing her power. The first thing that Abrams did when he became head of the NPA is he withdrew charges of perjury against Jiba. So Abrams is going to be on his own. He's going to be a lot more cautious. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, it's not clear to me. If he's going to be cautious about bringing wrongful prosecutions, that is good. But there's a big backlog of cases, corruption cases that they've not brought. They're hardly operating. And that is not good for the country. The Hawks, there's a case coming for the removal of the head of the Hawks, General Nklemeza. And you can see he's involved in a whole lot of other things where IPID are investigating in Limpopo and so forth. Then they are bringing charges against McBride. McBride, as head of IPID, is bringing charges against the acting commissioner of police. And there's complete disarray in the policing, prosecuting arm of government. And a lot of this has got to do with the attempt to settle scores with people that Zuma wants removed, or with paving the way to looting the treasury. And if you can put someone like Van Rooyen in place of Gordhan, then it's easy to do things. One of the people that this Van Rooyen brought in when he was made minister, he sent some document to the Guptas and he said in the email, "At last." In other words, we are here now. So they had been preparing for that. But it's not only the prosecuting authority. We've got the saga of the SABC, which has eventually got stripped down to the point where there's not a single board member left there. Every person who goes in the witness box who's colluded with Claudi Motsoeneng is actually being exposed, and the whole running of the public broadcaster is being exposed. And if there is a decision to rebuild it, it'll be a long task. We have problems in other state institutions like Eskom, lots of contracts, the rush to get nuclear energy, and the downplaying of the value of renewable energy sources, which are now much more economically viable. There was a time when solar energy priced itself outside what was viable. Now a lot of renewable energy, wind, sun, etc., is more viable. You've got problems in Denel, you've got problems in Transnet, in a number of these others, and I think as long as people see the state as a place to get their hands on resources, things are not going to come right.
Do you not think that the ANC has drawn lessons from its losses from the previous local government elections that will induce it to take action against malfunctioning and these irregularities?
Well, you know, the language of zero tolerance of corruption has been enunciated repeatedly, and the main one enunciating it is President Zuma. He always says zero tolerance of corruption. But we have a situation where even in the holiday period, things have come out about the Minister of Police and some woman who's allegedly a girlfriend of his getting a job. And I think there's a culture that is built in over a number of years, and I don't think it's all in the period of Zuma, whereby people see access to the state as a means to wealth. And I think it's tied up not just with morality, but also being in a low-growth economy, high unemployment, and the state is a key source of wealth for people, a key source of security for people, so that although the ANC recognizes that it lost a lot of votes because of the scandal surrounding the presidents, because of the perception of corruption, at the same time, its support base expects to be rewarded for supporting the ANC. We've seen situations where there's a lot of killings surrounding who got into what position, because getting a position at any level is seen as a way of spreading wealth to people who you're linked to. And I don't think that there's a plan for breaking up those patronage and corruption networks. Some people are not corrupt, but I mean, the people who are, I don't think they plan there. I don't think they even, I think they're still hungry.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crema Media's Polity about prospects for 2017.